understudy. I can't go on tonight. I'm drinking with my buddy. I'm dead too good and tight. Before they raise the curtain, I'll be higher than a kite. So call me understudy. I can't go on tonight. Tell the cast and crew to break a leg. Break a leg. I'll roll me out another bloody keg. Bloody keg. I need to ease the pain that life can bring. Life can bring. And liquor is what will hit the spot. The play is not the thing. So call me understudy. I think it's only right. My diction will be muddy. I'll ever find me light. Before the intermission, I'll be busy on a sprite. So call me understudy. I can't go on. He can't go on. I won't go on. He shan't go on. I can't go on tonight. Damn right.
You know what? You took the words out of my mouth. I was going to say partner in crime. I'm Aaron Bala. Hi, Kinda. Well, I mean, to think extemporaneously, I liked the world they brought us into. I know I mentioned this on the first podcast, so here it is coming around. Just we don't always get to see backstage of a theater production. I think the only other recent memory I have of that would be Smash, which is kind of like behind the scenes of a Broadway musical, and you're getting kind of a similar experience. But Slings and Arrows did it first, and they did it Canadian. And I like seeing that world, and I still like that we find the drama in that. And I don't know. I'm staring at the box set right now, and I'm just thinking, I mean, were there a few flaws? Yeah, I think there were a few storylines that kind of got repeated, but I mean, at the same time, I honestly can't tell you that this reminds me of any other show, and that's probably the greatest compliment I can pay to the show.
There was something so engaging about being a part of this world, and things that I found very interesting, which was not just the creative side, but the business side of keeping our
Mm.
artistry alive. I mean,
Mhm.
again, we go back to Richard, and just that idea of him having to peddle or sell creativity, and just that level of understanding that his job is no fun.
Mhm.
He's the one who's in the trenches trying to find the funding. And I really enjoyed that aspect of the show, understanding and knowing that it's not, I mean, to me, it was a strong, Slings and Arrows is a huge advocate for funding of the arts, in my opinion. And going to see the arts. I think if somebody goes to the theater more, or goes for the first time after seeing a television show, I think that's an enormous endorsement. And I love that it went international. I love that, there are people who have been watching this show definitely in America and in England. They really seem to have embraced it. They also have a strong theater community in both those countries. So yeah, I think Slings and Arrows, to me, was not just a well-told story and extremely funny, but I felt it gleaned a light on something that needed a little bit of attention. And I do go to the Stratford shows and review them, and the audience is I mean, that campaign that Sanjay did in I mean, as dreadful as it was, it kind of was very reflective of the audience. I'm lucky when I go to these things to see somebody my own age group, or or within 20 to 30 years of my own age group.
Now, do you think that's a price thing?
No, I don't, because we go to concerts. Young people go to concerts. So, you and I were both at the Coldplay concert, which was kind of amazing.
It was. I loved it. I still have my my light up wristband because it was so awesome. So maybe if the theater gives away light up wristbands, the young people will go. I'm just saying.
But the question is, how much were those tickets?
No, you have a point. They were roughly about the same as you'd see for a theater show.
Exactly. So, and I think, what a lot of younger people don't know is that you can get the seats to shows really cheap. They quite often do incredible student deals. I just found out the other day they do something at Stratford that's like 35 and under, So that's pretty far reaching, as far as age goes. It's not like, 21 and under or 18 and under. I mean, you could be 34 and be getting a discount because you're, 34. Wow. Was this show really popular? How popular was it? I felt it could have been more popular. What are your thoughts?
I think it could have been more popular. I think at the time, Showcase was still kind of a small player. And so maybe it wasn't as popular, but the thing with good television is it always grows and it always persists and it sticks around. And I mean, hey, that's why 6 years later we're rewatching the entire series, because it was so good and it sticks around and it stayed in people's minds. And so I don't know if I necessarily have exact numbers for how well it did, but I mean, it certainly did well enough to get 3 seasons, which is more than some other good shows get.
That's true. Has this been called a cult classic? Are we at the point where we call this a cult classic?
You know what? I think that's the perfect word for it, cult classic. It lives on in the hearts and minds of a few people, and they just keep spreading the word to everyone they know.
Cult, short for culture.
Yeah.
Culture classic?
Yeah, I think so. On a double level, yes.
That's exactly where I'm going.
It took me a second to get there, but I got you.
As far as Canadian television goes, how do you feel? Where does Slings and Arrows fit in? I thought this was really interesting when we were deciding what Canadian series we should focus on for our first rewatch. And really, the reason for that was because you have two extremes. You have like the Beachcombers and the Littlest Hobo, or you have like Flashpoint and Sanctuary and Being Erica and things that are like really super current. But there seems to be like this massive gap in within that time frame of Slings and Arrows or before that. So where do you think it fits in?
I mean, it's tough to tell because it came out so long ago to compare it to what else was around at the time. But I think in terms of what it did for especially Showcase, I think Slings and Arrows came out pretty early into Showcase making original programming. It came out probably in like their second season where they tried to create new and original programming, and I think it really helped them to propel themselves forward as I would say the premier channel for at the very least cable Canadian shows and possibly even just like Canadian TV and original Canadian content in general. Um, and I mean that and maybe Trailer Park Boys at the time really put them on the map, I think, in terms of making them a network to go to for these kinds of shows. Yeah, I think back of other like big kind of hits that had, if nothing, it's like an international presence. I guess there was The Littlest Hobo. This one, Slings and Arrows, definitely has some international presence, and I think maybe at the same time, Corner Gas. It might have been Corner Gas that had kind of a similar presence.
Corner Gas and Trailer Park Boys are like very much within a certain vein, and then you
Mm-hmm.
have like, I mean, that to me is lowbrow comedy, and then you have Slings and Arrows, which is very highbrow comedy. So
That's very true.
there's not much of a mid-range there in that, but I agree with you. The things that are standing out, that's really where it's at. I feel like internationally this may have been quite the stepping stone. This and something like Road to Avonlea and, like you said, The Littlest Hobo, like productions like that really seem to put, and what I find is I don't know if they're very innately Canadian, but they seem very innately Canadian to me. Like Slings and Arrows, I don't know how it translated to America, because Canadian funding for the arts is extremely different to American funding.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't, I don't quite know how the show related. I obviously the theater and the characters and all that kind of stuff is where it probably translates best to an international audience.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely. And I mean, I would even say like when you see Slings and Arrows and it putting Showcase on the map, it really it's helped them to kind of get to where they are now. Um, I think it's just interesting when you look at the kind of shows that Showcase makes now versus the shows that they were making at the beginning, where you had Slings and Arrows, you had these really quirky, interesting kind of shows that do generate the kind of broad appeal that you're looking for, or sorry, the maybe the more the niche appeal that you're looking for, that you'll find those pockets that audiences will just love globally. Whereas now I think they've got a little bit more of like a broader appeal. They've got Continuum, and they've got King, and they've got Lost Girl. And I mean, it's still very much a niche shows, but I think it's a little broader than I think, say, Slings and Arrows has been for them.
I have to tell you something really funny. I watched the other day an indie Canadian film with your favorite
Uh-oh.
Darren Nichols on it.
Oh, goody.
Yeah. And or also known as, his real name, which is Don McKellar. He answered the phone, and I figured this is probably... Anyway, the film is called I'm Yours. It stars Rossif Sutherland and Karine Vanness. I think this is how you should answer the phone from now on, because the way he said it and the way he did it, I thought Aaron is just going to love that. So he answered the phone, and he said, "Homicide."
Nice.
I thought that you would actually appreciate that quite a lot. So yeah, I'm passing.
I do.
It's
I do.
Could this be the greatest Canadian TV show? I don't. I think Corner Gas might be the greatest, but I mean, in terms of drama, I think it comes down to either this or Flashpoint, and I don't know. I think maybe the reason I want to say Flashpoint feels as good is because it has that American backing. It has that American, we know how to make TV, so we're going to give you notes on what you should do at X, Y, and Z. And I mean, it's good, but at the same time, it feels like it's a little rote. It hits all the points you expect it to hit, whereas Slings and Arrows is wildly unconventional, wildly outside the box, and that's what makes it so good.
Yeah, and I would completely agree with that comment. I have never. I am. There are some words I don't say. In and I don't allow other people really to say it, and you've kind of got away with it here, but I don't actually refer to Corner Gas in any way. I am a complete television snob in that way. I watched I did maybe watch an episode of it, and I was like, really, I don't get this. And I'm not saying it's a bad show, I'm just saying I don't get it. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. No, I get it, and I mean, truth be told, when they tried to move corn and gas into the states, it totally flopped. It Audiences in the states were not having it, and I think that made it feel even more Canadian. It was like Tim Hortons. America doesn't get it. It's totally ours.
Except that America owns Tim Hortons.
Oh, that's true. But they don't understand it like we understand it as Canadians.
Corner gas, I did not know that it had tried to go down into the states. And does that seem innately Canadian? I didn't feel that was. I felt that that's a small town community. You could get that anywhere.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
Now this kind of rounds to the question, which I think is a big question, and I
Mhm.
and I have very staunch views about this. So, um, do you think that, as Bob Martin said, here we go, should we, Slings may live again, should there be an additional seasons?
You know what? I'm gonna let you go first on this one. I think I usually answer the questions first. I want to know how you think about it.
Oh, oh.
Mhm.
Okay, so in my opinion, I think you can never go back. I think I'm the type of person who thinks that was beautiful just the way it was. And John Cleese agrees with me because because he made something finite with Faulty Towers.
Oh, Faulty Towers. I am so amazing. Good gosh.
I know. We could do a rewatch of Faulty Towers. That's one of my favorite shows. Anyway, and I do feel that. I feel like there is the perfection in it. That it only was, I think it was like 12 episodes, and it's the same with Slings and Arrows. It's only been 3 seasons, and it had something to say. Harper Lee, who did To Kill a Mockingbird,
Mhm.
they asked why, people have asked her over the years, why did you never write any more than To Kill a Mockingbird? And she said, I had something to say, and when I have
Mhm.
something else to say, I'll write another book. Which
Mhm.
I think is beautiful, because I think sometimes it can be like, oh, this is an enterprise and we should really flog this to the absolute last breath of it. And and then also I think like Ricky Gervais,
Mhm.
quality versus quantity. I mean, he has, again, a very specific approach to that as well. So those are my thoughts. I don't know. The show left it that I wanted to see more of the characters.
Mhm.
But I don't know whether it's not what the audience wants, it's what the audience needs.
Mhm.
So I don't know if I want, if I wanted to actually see them, go on and anything more than what we already have. So those are my thoughts. Now I'm dying to know, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think it is the rare time we are in total agreement. I think you can't get that lightning in a bottle again, and there are so few TV shows that have come back from the dead like that and have done so well afterwards. Family Guy and Futurama might be the only ones I think have really been able to sustain that creativity that they kept when they left, and they're animated shows, so I think you do put them in a bit of a different category. But that is a little interesting because the other show that's shooting right now, coming back from the dead, is Arrested Development, and I'll be very intrigued when it finally drops to see if it holds up to the original. I think I'm a little worried. I think right now there's too much hype for it and it can't live up to it, and you're just going to leave all the fans really sad. It, and I think the same thing would happen with Slings and Arrows if you try to make a fourth season. Could you do a fourth season creatively? Is there enough? Definitely, definitely. But would it be the same? No, it wouldn't. Everyone's older. The characters are different. You can't. What you had at the time just won't be continued.
I read somewhere that the show creators had thought, should there be a season 4,
Mhm.
one of the possibilities would be, because every year they did a production of
Mhm.
Shakespeare, it would be Richard III.
Okay.
Now that really interests me, because seeing how Richard III would pertain to the community, the theater community, because it relates, the play often relates to the community.
Mhm.
Really what you get in Richard III is descent within the ranks.
Mm.
You know, and one particular key figure picking people off. So, you know, what would happen in that scenario with the theater community, the new Burbage theater community? I don't know, but I now I'm intrigued. Now I'm like, oh well, where would that go? The other thing that would be a possibility would be a reboot. This is something that's become rather popular. Is you know, reshaping or remolding a show, either getting new characters in or new actors. There's a new Beauty and the Beast coming out. There's like television series. You see them doing this all the time with like, you know, superhero stuff. You know, would that be a possibility, like a Slings and Arrows reboot?
I think that feels at least a little better as a possibility. I guess, you know, you bring in new blood and it almost feels like a bit of a different show, but it still retains kind of the world of the original while you show those new stories. And I think a reboot could work better than a continuation. I want to say.
I see that. I see maybe a new theater company. Oh, this might be an idea. As I create the new show all by myself. You know, like a Winnipeg theater company or a Vancouver theater company. We could be seeing, you know, these perspectives or these perceptions. Like there's Bard on the Beach in Vancouver. You know, I mean, there might be something within that where you're not taking the story anymore from the Stratford Festival, but you're still talking within that theater community. But it could be an entirely new group of people.
No, I think reboots, as long as there's a reason for it existing, they're usually well received by the public.
I would be willing to see a reboot. I'm down with that.
I'm down with that as well.
Do you have any additional thoughts about the Slings and Arrows show at all? Is there anything else that you may not have mentioned? Is there something worth repeating? We're done. We're almost done here.
I know it's my final words. What can I say about it? I don't know. It was solid, you know, and I think it's rarer than we think in Canadian television for whatever reason for shows just not to be as solid as we want them to be. And I think, you know, for just the reason I said before, it's so wildly different, so wildly unconventional, and that's what made Slings and Arrows work. And I think good for them. And I hope even if they don't make a continuation of this show, they at least collaborate on something else in the future. Those are always good as well.
And my final thought is you do what I say, mister, or I'm going to slap you so hard, your cousin's going to fall down.
How'd you like your coffee, Kinda?
Black.
Cream and 2 sugars?
Yeah, black. Again, we do want to do more rewatches of Canadian television shows, and we want to hear what you would like us to review and talk about next. And we really did want to hear your comments and your feedback and your thoughts. And even though maybe this time around you missed it, maybe in the next rewatch you can play along with us. We are at www.pressplusnumeral1.com. This is the Slings and Arrows final episode of our Rewatch podcast, and you can find all the episodes for the Slings and Arrows Rewatch podcast on Press Plus One. We're going to leave up a little banner on the main page of the magazine all summer, and yeah, if you feel the need to leave a comment, please do so, because we can answer you, not in the podcast obviously, but we can answer you. We can write back and get a discussion going that way. I've enjoyed this immensely. Thank you so much for joining in, Aaron. This has been so much fun.
Thank you for the opportunity, Kenda.
Some great news for those who've been listening to the Slings and Arrows Rewatch podcast. As we promised, we got our listeners a special guest from the show, and today we welcome co-creator Bob Martin to the Slings and Arrows Rewatch podcast. Best known for being the co-creator of Slings and Arrows, the recently awesome but sadly cancelled Michael's Tuesdays and Thursdays, in which he also stars, and co-creator of the theatrical smash hit, The Drowsy Chaperone. Bob Martin also was the voice of Cuddles in Puppets Who Kill, and sparked a recent wave of interest back in the media when he tweeted, "Slings may live again." As if it couldn't be more perfectly timed, Bob's tweet and our podcast means that we get to not only talk about the incredible show he created, but what the future holds for it. First of all, I'd like to say thank you so much for doing this. This has been an enormous pleasure for us to, on Press Plus One, to do the rewatch of Slings and Arrows. We, both of us, both Aaron and myself, Aaron's not here today. Neither of us had seen the show the first time around.
Oh, okay.
And it's created such an enormous cult following that when we had said we want to pick a Canadian show to do a rewatch of, what's the first show we should do? And like outpouring unanimously, it was, do Slings and Arrows. It must be Slings and Arrows. So, you're really popular, which is great.
Well, it's strange. It's always surprising to us. I mean, we're particularly popular in the States. It's funny. I do a lot of work in New York, and people there are crazy for this show.
Yeah, that was something we discussed, was like how that would translate, because I mean, a large portion of the show is kind of how you get funding and, you know, funding for the arts, and they have a completely different model or structure in America, don't they?
Yes, they do. But I think the sort of backstage tensions and negotiations and politics, that's universal. So people really recognize that, and they also recognize, probably more so than anyone else, this struggle between art and commerce, which is kind of represented in the series. So they can appreciate that. I guess Slings and Arrows is kind of an idealized version of what they think of as the theater. I say they, like Americans are all one village or something. But just the people that I've talked to. I mean, when I met George Wendt, I was working on a project with George Wendt, and I'd never met him before, and he came up to me and said, "My wife and I want to live in New Burbage." That's the first thing he said to me. So it really appeals to American people, especially in the theater industry.
That's an enormous compliment.
Yeah, I was thrilled because I really liked the guy, and it was oh wow. I'm always surprised when people have seen anything that I had anything to do with, to be perfectly frank.
Well, and I think that's outrageous because you've done some incredible things. I mean, The Drowsy Chaperone has, won Tony Awards, gone to Broadway. I mean, and you've done Slings and Arrows, of course, and recently Michael Tuesdays and Thursdays, which I absolutely love the show, and I'm really sad. Can I talk to you about this? Is it officially no longer a season 2 at this point?
Oh yes, it was not picked up.
That hurts, like, inside, just a lot.
Well, we were really happy with it. I mean, the first season we feel is quite strong, and it begins and it ends. It's kind of a good standalone 12-episode miniseries in a sense. I mean, we would like to have done 2 more seasons, but the CBC is really going through a difficult time, and it just didn't happen.
Right, and that was something that I had wanted to, which, by the way, it's online. Did you know you can see all of the episodes on CBC?
Yeah, online, yes, I did know that. If you're in Canada, you can.
Yeah,
yes.
So any Canadians who have not yet seen Michael's Tuesdays and Thursdays, please check it out. One of the things I had wanted to know was Slings and Arrows intended to be just the 3 seasons? Like, was that something you very specifically had in mind?
Well, when we first started making the show, it was only intended to be 1 season of 6 episodes. But sort of halfway through production in the first season, we started to get really solid feedback from the network, and we realized that it had a great potential greater life. And so we reconceived it as a 3-season arc, sort of thematically structured, so that we dealt with youth, middle age, and old age in the 3 seasons, and we didn't intend to go any further than season 3. Once we decided it was more than one season, we didn't want to go any further than 3.
Yeah, and then you created this storm of interest on Twitter recently, saying, you know, that Slings may live again.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I was being honest. It's funny because I don't really, I just sort of dabble in Twitter. And I was in New York and I was doing some stuff there, and I was alone in my apartment late one night, and I saw that somebody asked whether we'd ever considered a 4th season, and I just answered him, and then it just, one thing led to another. I didn't realize he had 8,000 followers, and it was retweeted, and then I was contacted by the press, and then there was an article in the Globe and Mail. It was hilarious, a hilarious crash course in the power of social media for me. But we have been meeting about doing something with Slings, because it's partly because we can't ignore the fact that people love the show. It's still, I mean, I still see articles about it. There was an article recently in the New York Times about the show because of Smash, and Smash's approach to the same subject matter. So yeah, we've been meeting seriously about how to revisit it. And we have some ideas. I mean, there's certainly interest in terms of broadcasters or people funding us. It's kind of about scheduling at this point. We're all busy with other stuff, so we're just finding the time to work on something. Whether it'll be a 4th season, or whether it'll be a special, or whether it'll be something even more interesting, we can't say at this point.
We discussed it heavily on this last episode of our podcast, and we both Aaron and I, and we pretty much never agree on anything. Both agreed that we would prefer not to see like an extension of the storyline that it was. We thought it ended completely beautifully, and you know, the Lear ending, and with Oliver and Jeffrey, and we thought that was just picture perfect. But we thought something we've decided, here's the route you should go, is that there's a lot of like reboots now, or you know, you could take that and essentially add that to a different company. Like, you know, there's Bard on the Beach in Vancouver, or there's, you know, Fabulous Theatre in Winnipeg, or you know what I mean, and maybe shine a light on a new company altogether.
Oh yes, that is a possibility. We actually were talking to someone about doing that at one point. Yes.
But then I heard that I saw also on your Twitter, which, be careful of that. It's a dangerous medium. I also read that you were thinking of maybe doing Richard III, which would be ideal for a next season.
Well, we had talked about sort of examining Richard III. We talked about it in great detail because it's a play that we all love, and obviously the parallels are really intriguing in the real world. And so that was sort of prime, you know, fertile ground, but we didn't do a 4th season. I mean, I agree with you that the story ended. It's really difficult to imagine visiting Jeffrey and Oliver again, and it's difficult to imagine bringing Ellen and Jeffrey back together again, or breaking them up again. I mean, we did it so many times. It's just sort of finished. But yes, as I said in one of my tweets, we're thinking laterally about how to revisit this material. I'm sorry, that's all I can say. But really, it'll be. I'm extremely. I've got a lot of stuff on the boil right now, but I am extremely excited about what we are talking about doing with Slings. So, in a few months, we'll be able to be more public about it. But I don't want to jinx anything. I don't like talking about things when they're really embryonic, because then I start to lose faith.
We're very happy with what you've just told us. Thank you. I wanted to know how you got involved with Slings and Arrows to begin with.
It was a long time ago now, so my memory is a little foggy of it. But I know that it had been in development for, I think, a year before I came on board. Tekka Crosby originally came to Rhombus with an idea about a sort of backstage television series. And Susan Coyne and Mark McKinney were brought on to write it. and they were sort of working on it, and it was sort of it wasn't gelling. It was the voice wasn't clear exactly what the angle was, whether it was a satire of Stratford or whether it was at one point very clearly a murder mystery. It was it was a completely different thing. And then when I came on board, and I had sort of more series experience than Susan and Mark at that time. They've gone on to do tons of TV. I mean, Mark had done a lot of sketch, but I'm sort of well versed in structure and larger questions about developing material. So anyway, we worked together. We had this real simpatico immediately, and we started to focus in on what would make the series really interesting, which is to really examine a play each season and have the themes within the play reflected in the plot and the real world characters. And it's a sly satire on the state of Stratford, and Stratford has graciously sort of followed the model that we've laid out for it over the years, strangely enough. And it just sort of started to gel, and then we started to produce scripts fairly quickly. And then there was a bit of a crisis because we lost our broadcaster just before we were going into production in the first season. It was originally supposed to be on CBC, and they pulled out just about 2 weeks before we were going to go into production. And Neve Fitchman worked his magic and managed to get Showcase and Movie Network and Movie Central on board, and that ended up being a huge blessing for us because it was pay. We had more freedom, and they were fantastic partners in the whole project, and then it just went from there.
And really, it was a catalyst for Showcased as well, because it was one of their first original works.
Yeah, I think it helped define that network to a certain extent.
I would call you an expert of Canadian television at this point, and one of the reasons we had decided to do rewatches, and particularly Canadian television rewatches, is because they've come such a long way in maybe the last 5-10 years, and the industry kind of has come a little bit to a certain extent to have an enormous level of change again. Because of the what's going on with the funding and CBC and all that sort of thing. So I wanted to hear what your thoughts were on Canadian television and kind of where Slings and Arrows fits into that.
Well, I don't know. It's hard for me to have to be completely objective about this. I know that I'm, of course, extremely upset with what's happening with the CBC, but. It's a very difficult market in Canada for sure. We're competing with a huge giant right next door, just flooding us with pop culture. The audiences and the budgets and everything are far higher in the United States. American shows get far more press than Canadian shows did. I mean, a second season of Slings got very little press, even though the first season was critically acclaimed and everything. It's always a battle to get attention for Canadian product, and television itself is changing now because of basically streaming media, and some original programming is being produced by Netflix and Hulu and Google, and that is for sure the future. So then we start getting into copyright issues and whether we can have global programming rather than national programming. I mean, everything is really changing. It's actually the most exciting time I can remember in television, but it's also extremely scary. The route that I'm kind of embarking on now is American-Canadian co-productions. So you have an American broadcast partner and like the kind of Rookie Blue model. And that's what I hope will... you'd be the best of both worlds for future Canadian television.
Well, and because Canadian television has really become internationally much more well-known. I mean, we've always kind of done well on an international circuit, but just really within the last 5 years or so, going more international seems the way... It's odd because it seems the way that we receive it better in Canada. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we have a very small market. So yes, if we can break into an international market, then we double, triple our potential viewing audience. Yeah, it's and for sure our programming can definitely stand up with the best in the world, and I think we have a huge advantage over Americans because we are more courageous with our material. Like a show like it's really interesting to compare Slings and Arrows and Smash actually because Slings could not have been made in the United States in 2006 and 2000 whatever 5, and clearly it would be difficult to make it there today. The pressures of a large market mean that you can't be as smart with the programming on a network anyway. It's more about more conventional storylines, and can the average person is this material accessible for them? So we have a lot more freedom because we have a smaller market, and the numbers are not. We don't expect the numbers to be as high.
Right. So more creative freedom, essentially. But then that actually is more interesting to an international market, maybe.
I think it's always more interesting to anybody, personally. The more specific something is, the more honest it is, and the more, the more it just, you can say far more important things when you're very detailed and honest with your presentation of some subject matter.
The comedy in Slings and Arrows was so brilliant. I mean, there are sayings I use in my lexicon regularly now, like, and I just randomly say to people, like, listen up, mister, if you don't do what I'm going to say, I'm going to smack you so hard your cousin's going to fall down. And really, one of the show front runners for us is your partner, Don McKellar's character, Darren Nichols. I mean, the humor that came out was, it just, like you said, a little less mainstream, but a whole lot funnier.
Yeah, I love Darren Nichols. I mean, Ellen and Darren were my favorite characters to write or to participate in the creation of. Darren was hilarious, and Don was absolutely perfect. Don is nothing like Darren Nichols, of course, but he got the humor immediately, and I remember a speech, I guess what it was, season 2, when he's talking about having come back from Germany and understanding that the musical theater is the voice of the common man and everything like that. And I remember him trying to get through that speech and just not being able to keep a straight face, and we had to keep cutting, and it was always fun working with Don, but it was particularly fun when he was being Darren, and he got to wear absolutely outrageous outfits too.
Yeah, they were. It actually inspired. It's a shame Aaron's not here today. It was his favorite character, and he went out, went to the shopping center the other day and tried on a tunic because of Darren Nichols. He was inspired to try on a tunic, and he says, "I'm not a tunic man, but apparently Darren is." So.
Yeah.
What's one of your favorite memories of shooting the show?
Well, I can answer that question two ways. Probably my favorite scene it was in the first season. I mean, the thing I love about Slings is the mixture of tones that we're able, within a single scene, we can have it quite moving and quite comic, and there's a scene in which Jeffrey explains why Ophelia is singing children's songs to Claire, to Sabrina Gerdovich. Claire's character, she's pretending to be stoned, and he's asking her, "Why are you being stoned when you're playing Ophelia?" And she's saying, "Well, because nothing she's doing makes any sense." and she's singing these children's songs, and there's no way for me to motivate them. Anyway, he gives this whole speech to her about why Ophelia has been reduced to singing these childish songs, and the scene took a long time to write because we had to research it quite thoroughly. One of the problems of Slings is that Jeffrey's a genius, so everything he says has to be really bang on, so that takes a huge amount of research for every line. So just his, it's a beautiful marriage of writing and performance and directing, I think, that particular scene. Jeffrey is explaining with tears in his eyes why Ophelia is reduced to singing children's songs, and Sabrina plays it beautifully. She starts crying herself, and then it's all undercut with a joke at the end, and then when we in the background we see Claire just continuing to spin around as if she's stoned because she can't deal with the direction. So anyway, that scene is one I love. And a moment that was really special was in season 2 when we were filming East Hastings at Theater Pass Marais, I believe. Yes. So East Hastings, the fictional musical within season 2. And everybody was there. Dawn was there. I was there. Lisa Lambert and Greg Morrison were there. So we're all the authors of the Drowsy Chaperone. And Lisa Lambert and Greg Morrison wrote the music for East Hastings, the fictional musical. And we're performing it at Theater Pass Marais, which is a theater where we perform Drowsy Chaperone. And while we were filming this, I got a phone call from my producer in New York that we just got a Broadway theater for Drowsy Chaperone. So I remember that moment because there were just so many levels of irony going on. This fictional musical on stage, we get a call about our fictional musical going to Broadway, and all the authors are there in the room, and it was just a really, really exciting moment.
That's brilliant. That's just brilliant. Which character? I know you said who you like to write the most for, but who did you identify with of the characters?
That's hard to say. I mean, I would love to say Jeffrey because he's the mad genius. I mean, Jeffrey definitely. Susan, Mark, and I sort of used Jeffrey to sort of tell the world what we felt about the theater, about what it should be in the state of theater. So we all, I believe we would all say that we identify with him. He's an idealized version of us in many ways, I guess. That sounds really arrogant, but I don't mean it that way. But it's just, he was saying all the things we wish we were smart enough to say. But I did, as I say, I did love writing Ellen. I mean, Ellen was a difficult character to get a handle on. And then there was this one line of dialogue that was written where she just said, I think she was complaining about something to the cast, and she just said, sorry for caring. And that just focused the character completely for us. this sort of passive aggressive tendency in her, and so she was great. I mean, I suppose of all the characters, the sweetest and the heart of the whole series is Anna, as beautifully played by Susan Coyne. So I guess she's the most noble of them all. But I kind of love them all in their
in their own ways.
Yeah.
That's interesting you mentioned about Ellen. I loved it in the first season where she would randomly yell at people and then apologize.
Yeah, exactly. That's the dynamic that came to define her character. Yeah.
So we're kind of excited that there's even the inkling of a possibility of more Slings and Arrows. So thanks for putting that out in the universe. We're all going to put good energy towards that happening in whatever form it exists in. And thank you so much for revisiting Slings and Arrows with me today. Again, we think it's a not just myself, but the larger Canadian public think it's a standout television program and Canadian content and internationally loved. So thank you so much for doing the show.
Well, thank you for watching it and paying so much attention to it. We're really quite proud of it.
You have every reason to be. I mean, actually, all three of the creators have. I sent each of you a tweet or an email, and you all got back to me, which is a testament to how much you feel like you've done a product that you like you said you feel proud of.
Yeah, it's or how much we all like to talk. Could be that as well.
There is that possibility. Great. Well, all the best of luck for the future. And again, audiences, you can watch Michael Tuesdays and Thursdays on CBC right now, and send them a little note and tell them how much you loved it, because I know I did. And also you can watch Slings and Arrows right now on Netflix, and this will be the end of our summer rewatch podcast. So we will leave this up on Press Plus One all summer, so you can play along even though we're done with it. But thank you for listening.
And thank you.
I'm drinking with my buddy, I'm dead too good and tight. Before they raise the curtain, I'll be higher than a kite. So call me understudy, I can't go on tonight. Tell the cast and crew to break a leg. Break a leg. Roll me out another bloody keg. Bloody keg. I need to ease the pain that life can bring. Life can bring. And liquor is what will hit the spot. The play is not the thing. So call me understudy. I think it's only right. My diction will be muddy. I'll ever find me light. Before the intermission, I'll be busy on a sprite. So call the understudy. I can't go on. He can't go on. I won't go on. He shan't go on. I can't go on.